The warrior stood alone in silence, holding a bowl shattered beyond repair. To the untrained eye, it was ruined. To him, it was a mirror. In ancient Japan, broken things were not hidden. They were studied, honored, reforged with gold. Yet modern men are taught the opposite. Hide your cracks, mask your failures, pretend you were never wounded. This is why so many feel empty, strong on the outside, shattered within. Every man walks this path eventually, the moment when discipline collapses, when fear speaks louder than purpose, when the ego can no longer protect the spirit. It feels like failure. It feels like weakness. But the ancients knew a different truth. The crack is not the end. It is the entry point. This story follows a warrior who believed his strength was gone forever, until a silent mentor showed him the forgotten law of Kintsugi, that what breaks you can become the source of your deepest mastery. This is not a story about motivation. It is a story about presence, about stillness forged through pain, about discipline reborn from ruin. If you are broken, this path was meant for you. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, so I can keep bringing you great content. The warrior did not fall in battle. No blade cut him down. No enemy stood over his body in victory. His fracture came quietly. It arrived in the early hours of the morning when discipline once lived, but now hesitation ruled. When the body woke, but the spirit delayed. When the mind reached for noise before purpose. He still wore the shape of a warrior, but inside something essential had cracked. Once his days were ruled by order, breath before thought, action before doubt. Now they dissolved into fragments, unfinished intentions, restless nights, dull anger with no clear target. He told himself this was temporary. Everyone weakens, he thought. Everyone loses focus. But the silence told a harsher truth. In the absence of discipline, fear grows roots. Not loud fear, no trembling hands or racing heart, but the quiet kind. The fear of facing oneself without armor. The fear of stillness. The fear that the strength he once trusted was never real to begin with. The warrior avoided mirrors, not of glass but of awareness. He filled his time with motion, his mind with distraction, his ego with memory. He replayed past victories as proof that he was still intact. Yet each repetition felt hollow. Memory could not carry him forward. Only presence could, and presence had abandoned him. Ancient teachers warned of this moment, when the sword dulls not from use but neglect, when the spirit weakens not from hardship but avoidance. The warrior's greatest suffering was not failure. It was confusion. He could not name what he had lost, only that something vital no longer answered when called. His body moved, but without intention. His words spoke, but without weight. He existed, but he was not present. Modern science would call this fragmentation. The mind divided against itself, dopamine scattered by constant stimulation, attention eroded, purpose diluted. But the ancients named it more precisely. They called it a loss of center. Without a center, strength becomes unstable. Discipline becomes performative. Ego steps in to imitate mastery. An ego is loud, defensive, fragile. It promises control while feeding on avoidance. The warrior did not see this at first. Ego rarely announces itself. It disguises weakness as entitlement, exhaustion as injustice, distraction as freedom. It whispers, "You deserve rest," when what it really wants is escape. Days passed, weeks followed, each one deepening the fracture. The warrior noticed small signs. He reacted where he once responded. He sought validation where he once sought silence. He grew irritated by things that never touched him before. These were not random moods. They were symptoms, signals from a spirit demanding attention. Yet he resisted, because to admit fracture felt like surrender. Men are taught to endure, not to examine, to push forward, not to pause, to conquer outward enemies while ignoring inner decay. The warrior followed this code faithfully, until it betrayed him. One evening, alone, he held an object long forgotten, a bowl, once whole, now cracked from a careless fall. Years ago, he had kept it without knowing why. Perhaps because it mirrored something unspoken. He turned it slowly in his hands. The crack was thin, uneven, imperfect. It ruined the symmetry, made the bowl less useful, less valuable by ordinary standards. Most would discard it, replace it, forget it. The warrior felt a familiar tightening in his chest. This is me, he realized, not broken in half, but fractured just enough to leak strength. In that moment, something shifted. Not relief, not hope, awareness. The ancient Stoics taught that suffering begins not with pain, but with resistance to reality. The warrior had resisted long enough. He had treated fracture as an enemy when it was a message. He finally allowed himself to sit still. No distractions, no defenses, no stories, just breath, just presence, just the quiet weight of truth. And the truth was simple: his strength had not vanished. It had been buried beneath avoidance. Discipline had not failed him. He had abandoned it. Not out of weakness, but out of fear of facing what he might find beneath the surface. This realization did not heal him, but it opened the path. Ancient systems never promise comfort. They promise clarity, and clarity often arrives like a blade, clean, precise, unforgiving. The warrior understood now. Denial deepens the fracture. Awareness exposes it. Only then can transformation begin. He rose before dawn the next morning, not with confidence, but with intention. He did not know how to repair. He only knew that running had ended. Somewhere beyond the noise, beyond the habits that weakened him, there existed a quieter place, a place where broken things were not discarded, but studied. A place where silence was not emptiness, but instruction. And without knowing it yet, the warrior had taken his first step toward it. The fracture had revealed the need for a guide, and the path would soon place one in his way. The path led away from noise. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but deliberately. The warrior found himself walking where the air felt older, heavier with stillness. No banners marked the place. No voices announced wisdom. There was only the sound of wind moving through wood, and the faint rhythm of tools striking clay. He saw the craftsman before he heard him. An old man sat beneath a low roof, hands steady, posture relaxed, yet exact. His movements were slow, not from weakness, but from precision. Each gesture carried intention. Nothing was wasted, nothing hurried. Time seemed to move differently around him, as if it had agreed to obey. The warrior waited for greeting. None came. Minutes passed, perhaps longer. The craftsman continued his work, eyes lowered, breath even. The silence stretched, not awkward, but exposing. The warrior felt it press against him, stripping away distraction. Without conversation, there was nowhere to hide. This was the first lesson, though no words were spoken. Strength, the warrior realized, does not announce itself. Mastery does not rush to be seen. In modern life, silence is treated as absence, a gap to be filled. But in ancient systems, silence is pressure. It reveals what noise conceals. As the warrior stood there, thoughts rose uninvited. Doubts, impatience, irritation. His ego stirred, seeking relevance. Why does he not speak? Does he not see me? The craftsman finally looked up. His eyes were calm, unburdened. He studied the warrior briefly, not with judgment, but with accuracy. Then he returned to his work. That look did more than words ever could. It told the warrior that he had been seen, and found uncentered. The craftsman spoke at last, voice low, unadorned. You are loud inside. No accusation, no advice, just observation. The warrior stiffened. He wanted to explain himself, to list his failures, his efforts, his reasons, but the old man had already turned away. Explanation was unnecessary. The truth had already surfaced. Ancient teachers understood something modern psychology now confirms: awareness precedes regulation. Until the mind is observed, it cannot be disciplined. Until the noise is heard, it cannot be quieted. The craftsman worked as he spoke, hands steady, breath aligned with movement. You seek repair, he said, but you have not studied the break. The warrior felt the words strike deep. He had come seeking answers, perhaps even redemption. Instead, he was being asked to remain with discomfort, to stay present without distraction, to endure not pain but exposure. Hours passed this way. No lectures, no techniques, only observation. The craftsman would pause occasionally, adjusting pressure, correcting alignment, every action precise, intentional. The warrior began to notice patterns. The craftsman never forced the material. When resistance appeared, he adjusted, not with frustration, but patience. When cracks showed, he did not hide them. He traced them with his fingers, studying their direction, their cause. This was discipline without aggression, strength without tension. The warrior's breathing slowed, his shoulders dropped. For the first time in months, his mind was not running ahead. It was here. Modern science would say his nervous system was settling, cortisol lowering, attention stabilizing. But the ancients had no need for such terms. They simply said the spirit was returning to center. Finally the warrior spoke. I was stronger before. The craftsman nodded slightly. Still working. You were louder, he replied. The distinction cut clean. Strength, the mentor revealed, is not intensity. It is consistency. It is the ability to remain present without force. Ego seeks peaks, moments of dominance. Discipline seeks foundations. You confuse effort with mastery, the craftsman said. Effort exhausts. Mastery endures. The warrior watched his hands. They trembled slightly, not from weakness, but from unfamiliar stillness. He had spent so long in motion, that calm felt threatening. This place, the craftsman continued, removes distraction. What remains is who you are. The warrior understood now why silence frightened him. In silence there were no excuses, no performance, no escape, only reality. And reality revealed fracture, but it also revealed possibility. The mentor did not promise healing. He did not speak of transformation. He did not praise suffering. He simply modeled a different way of being, one rooted in presence, guided by patience, governed by discipline. Before the warrior could ask anything more, the craftsman stood and retrieved a broken bowl from a shelf. Its cracks were deep, uneven, unmistakable. He placed it between them. Tomorrow, he said quietly, you will learn why this is not ruined. The warrior looked at the bowl, then back at the mentor. For the first time since his fracture, he felt something unfamiliar, not confidence, not relief, but trust, not in the mentor, in the path. And as the sun lowered, the warrior sensed that his understanding of strength was about to be dismantled and rebuilt along lines he had never considered. Chanti Dindorn. The bowl rested between them, like a quiet accusation. Its surface was pale, once smooth, now interrupted by a web of fractures. Some cracks were thin as hairlines, others ran deep, jagged, unapologetic. The warrior studied it closely, waiting for the mentor to explain, to instruct, to justify why such a broken thing still occupied space. The craftsman said nothing. Instead, he brought forward a small tray, powdered gold, lacquer, simple tools worn smooth by years of use. Nothing extravagant, nothing hidden. The materials of restoration were modest, yet deliberate. The warrior watched, confused. In his world, broken objects were discarded, replaced, forgotten. Value belonged to what remained intact. Strength was measured by what endured without damage. This bowl violated every rule he had lived by. The mentor finally spoke. This bowl remembers, he said. Do you? The question unsettled the warrior. He had spent years trying to forget. Mistakes, losses, moments where discipline faltered. Forgetting felt like survival. Remembering felt dangerous. The craftsman began the work, slowly, intentionally. He traced a crack with his finger, following its path without judgment. Then he applied lacquer, not to hide the fracture, but to prepare it. The movement was precise, almost reverent. The gold would come later. First, there was acknowledgement. This is Kintsugi, the mentor said, not repair, revelation. The warrior leaned closer. The mentor explained that in ancient Japan, Kintsugi was never about restoring an object to what it was. It was about honoring what had happened. The break became part of the history. The crack, once a flaw, became the structure. Damage, the mentor continued, is not random. It leaves direction, information. The warrior felt the weight of those words. He thought of his own fractures, moments of failure, lapses in discipline, fear he refused to name. He had treated them as proof of weakness. The mentor saw them as data, as guidance. Modern psychology echoes this truth. Trauma reshapes neural pathways. Failure rewires behavior. Pain teaches attention, but only if it is studied. Ignored pain repeats itself. Observed pain transforms. The craftsman mixed the gold into the lacquer. Most men rush this part, he said. They want the shine without the understanding. He applied the gold carefully, pressing it into the crack. The line glowed, not loudly, but unmistakably. The fracture did not disappear. It was illuminated. The warrior felt something shift inside him. His fear had always been exposure, that if his cracks were seen, he would lose value. But here, the crack increased value. The bowl was no longer ordinary. It carried a story, a lineage of damage and care. Why gold? The warrior asked. The mentor did not look up. Because repair should demand respect, he replied. Gold slows the hand, forces presence, cheap materials invite carelessness. The lesson was clear. If you treat your inner fractures casually, you rebuild carelessly. If you honor them, you rebuild with precision. The warrior remembered how quickly he had tried to move past his failures, how eagerly he had chased distraction, performance, validation. He had skipped the most important step, understanding. Kintsugi did not rush. The mentor allowed time to pass. The bowl rested. The gold settled. Patience was part of the method. Without it, the repair would fail. This was discipline in its truest form, not force, but restraint. You believe your pain weakened you, the mentor said, but it refined you. You simply refused to learn from it. The warrior lowered his gaze. Fear, he realized, had not destroyed him. Avoidance had. Fear is a signal, a boundary, a teacher. But when resisted, it turns inward. It fractures the spirit silently. The mentor held the bowl up to the light. The cracks caught the glow. Each line told a story of impact, pressure, survival. The bowl was no longer symmetrical, but it was more honest. So it is with the warrior. The mentor said, you will never return to who you were. That man is gone, but you may become someone integrated, someone real. The warrior felt grief at that truth, and relief. He no longer had to perform strength. He only had to embody it. In ancient Stoic thought, obstacles were not barriers. They were the way forward. What stands in the path becomes the path. Kintsugi was that philosophy made visible. The mentor placed the bowl back down. Your fractures, he said, are maps. Follow them. The warrior understood now. His past failures were not stains to erase. They were seams to reinforce. His anger revealed boundaries crossed. His exhaustion revealed misaligned effort. His loss of discipline revealed misplaced identity. Pain carried instruction, but only for those willing to look. As the day faded into evening, the warrior felt a quiet resolve form within him. Not ambition, not urgency, commitment. He would stop hiding his cracks. He would stop rushing repair. He would learn to rebuild with awareness. The path ahead would not be easy. Kintsugi demanded patience, humility, and presence. But for the first time since his fracture, the warrior did not fear the work. He welcomed it. For now he knew what had broken him had not disqualified him. It had prepared him for a deeper form of strength. Tranti Dindoan. The bowl was finished. The work was not. The warrior believed understanding would bring relief. That insight alone would ease the weight he carried. But the mentor knew better. Knowledge without discipline becomes another ornament for the ego to wear. And ego, once threatened, does not surrender quietly. Understanding is not mastery, the mentor said one morning. It is permission to begin. The tests started small, simple tasks, repetitive, humbling. The warrior was told to rise before dawn and sit in silence. No meditation technique, no mantra, just stillness. To observe the breath, to observe the mind, to notice how quickly it demanded stimulation, validation, movement. At first the warrior welcomed the discipline. It felt familiar. Familiarity fed confidence. Confidence fed ego. Then impatience appeared. Minutes felt like hours. Thoughts raced, old ambitions resurfaced. The mind searched for progress, for markers of success. When none appeared, frustration followed. The mentor watched quietly. Ego thrives on measurement, on comparison, on being seen. In silence, it starves. Modern neuroscience confirms this struggle. The brain, conditioned by constant reward, resists deprivation. When stimuli are removed, discomfort arises. This discomfort is not danger. It is withdrawal from distraction. Most men mistake it for weakness. The warrior did too. I am wasting time, he said one morning. I should be doing more. The mentor met his eyes. You are doing exactly what you fear, he replied. Nothing. The words struck deep. The warrior had built his identity on action, on productivity, on visible strength.
Stillness threatened that identity. Without motion, who was he? That question unsettled him more than failure ever had. The mentor increased the discipline. The warrior was given tasks that seemed beneath him: cleaning tools, repairing cracks in old bowls, carrying water. No praise, no acknowledgement, just repetition. This was not punishment, it was calibration. Each task stripped away entitlement. Each repetition exposed resistance. The warrior noticed how often his mind protested, how often he wanted recognition, how often he replayed old versions of himself to justify his discomfort. That voice, that constant need to assert worth, was the ego. Ancient warriors understood this well. Ego is useful in battle, but destructive in training. It seeks shortcuts. It resists humility. It fears being ordinary. Mastery demands the opposite. One afternoon, exhausted and irritated, the warrior confronted the mentor. "You are breaking me down," he said.
The mentor nodded. Yes, no defense, no explanation, just truth. The warrior realized then that he had mistaken ego for strength his entire life. Ego had driven him to perform, to push, to dominate. But it had never taught him how to endure uncertainty, how to remain calm without applause, how to face himself without armor. Ego survives on noise, on identity, on control. Stillness dismantles it. As days passed, something began to loosen. The warrior stopped counting time, stopped seeking milestones. He began performing tasks with attention rather than ambition. Cleaning became an act of presence. Repetition became grounding. The mentor spoke less. Observation replaced instruction. One evening, the warrior dropped a repaired bowl. It cracked again along a new line. The old warrior inside him surged with anger, failure, carelessness, proof that he was unworthy of the craft. He waited for correction. The mentor only said, "Good." The word confused him. "This is how you learn where force still hides." The mentor explained. "You thought your ego was gone. It was only quiet. Ego does not disappear all at once. It sheds layers. Each fracture reveals another." The warrior understood now why ancient systems emphasize humility so relentlessly. Not as morality, but as mechanics. Without humility, discipline hardens into arrogance. Presence becomes rigidity. The mentor showed him how to repair the bowl again. Slower this time, more deliberate, with less tension in the hands. "This is the difference," the mentor said, guiding his grip. "Power without ego is controlled. Power with ego leaks." The warrior felt it, a subtle shift, less force, more precision, less urgency, more clarity. Breaking the ego was not destruction, it was refinement. In Stoic philosophy, the self is divided into what can be controlled and what cannot. Ego clings to illusion, control over outcome, identity, recognition. Discipline accepts reality and focuses on effort. The warrior began to see his past failures differently. They were not moments where he lacked strength. They were moments where ego resisted adaptation. As ego weakened, something unexpected emerged. Calm, not emptiness, not passivity, a grounded steadiness. The warrior no longer felt the need to prove himself. His actions became quieter, his presence heavier. The mentor observed this shift and finally spoke words that mattered. "Now," he said, "you are empty enough to be rebuilt." The warrior bowed, not out of submission, but understanding. He had not been broken by the process. He had been unburdened. And in that space, something stronger than ego was forming. For the path ahead would no longer be about removing weakness, but about forging strength from stillness. Tronti Dinduen's stillness was no longer something the warrior practiced. It had become something he lived inside. He no longer woke with resistance. There was no inner argument, no negotiation between comfort and discipline. His body rose quietly, guided by rhythm rather than willpower. Breath settled before thought. The mind followed instead of leading. This was the difference. Earlier, discipline had felt like force pressure applied against weakness. Now it felt like alignment, as if the body, mind, and spirit had finally agreed to move in the same direction. The mentor said nothing. True progress does not need recognition. When discipline becomes natural, praise only feeds the ego it worked so hard to dissolve. The warrior continued his tasks, repairing bowls, preparing lacquer, cleaning the workspace. But the quality of his attention had changed. His hands were lighter, his movements precise. There was no rushing toward completion. Every action was complete in itself. Presence had replaced urgency. Modern science would describe this as regulation. The nervous system no longer trapped in fight or flight, attention stabilized, energy conserved. But the ancients understood it without language. They called it returning to the center. Fear still visited him. It always does. Fear is part of being alive, but it no longer ruled his decisions. When uncertainty arose, he did not react. He paused. He observed. He adjusted. Fear had become information, not authority. One morning, the mentor placed a severely damaged bowl before him. Its fractures were deep, branching in unpredictable directions. Repairing it would require patience beyond technique. Any tension, any haste, would cause it to fail. The warrior did not hesitate. He prepared the materials slowly, measured the lacquer, mixed the gold with care. He noticed his breath, adjusted his posture, softened his grip. There was no anxiety about the outcome, only respect for the process. As he worked, memories surfaced, not as distractions, but as guidance. Moments where anger had taken control, where ego had demanded recognition, where discipline had collapsed under pride. He saw the patterns clearly now. Each failure traced back to force instead of presence. Each insight refined his touch. This was Kintsugi beyond craft. His past was no longer a burden. It was instruction. The mentor observed quietly, then spoke. "You are not fixing the bowl," he said. "You are fixing your relationship with pressure." The warrior understood immediately. Before, pressure had triggered resistance. Now it invited attention. He no longer tightened against difficulty. He leaned into it with awareness. This was strength that did not exhaust itself. The gold settled into the cracks. The bowl held. When he lifted it, the warrior felt no pride, only calm satisfaction. The quiet confidence that comes from alignment, not achievement. The mentor nodded once. "Stillness," he said, "is not the absence of movement. It is movement without waste." The warrior carried this truth into everything that followed. Days passed. The routine remained unchanged. But the warrior himself was no longer rebuilding consciously. The rebuilding had become automatic. His discipline did not depend on motivation. His presence did not collapse under stress. When anger appeared, it passed through without anchoring. When doubt surfaced, it was examined, not obeyed. When fatigue arrived, he rested without guilt and returned without delay. This was not emotional suppression, it was emotional mastery. The mentor explained it simply. "Emotion is energy," he said. "Stillness teaches it where to go." In ancient systems, this was called spirit. In modern terms, regulation. Different language, same truth. One evening, as light faded, the mentor handed the warrior the first bowl they had repaired together, the one that had begun this transformation. Its golden seams glowed softly, not demanding attention, yet impossible to ignore. "Take it," the mentor said. The warrior hesitated. "It belongs to the path now." The mentor continued, "And you are walking it." The warrior bowed, not in gratitude alone, but in understanding. The system no longer lived outside him. It had become internal. Discipline was no longer behavior. It was identity. He knew now that stillness was not withdrawal from life. It was engagement without distortion, strength without aggression, power without noise. He was not unbreakable. He was adaptable. As he prepared to leave, the mentor spoke one final truth. "What you have repaired will fracture again," he said. "That is not failure. That is life." The warrior accepted the words without fear, because he now understood the deepest law of mastery. Strength is not built once, it is maintained through presence. And as he stepped back into the world, carrying no title and no proof, he knew the final lesson awaited him, not in silence, but in motion. For the path does not end in stillness, it begins there. The warrior left at dawn. No ceremony marked his departure. No final instruction was given. The mentor did not watch him go. There was nothing left to say. The path had already been placed inside him. He stepped back into the world without armor, without titles, without the identity he once clung to. The city was louder than he remembered, faster, sharper. Distractions pulled at attention like open hands, demanding tribute. But something was different now. The noise did not enter him. Stillness traveled with him, not as isolation, but as orientation. He moved through crowds without absorbing their urgency. He worked without needing validation. He spoke less, listened more. His presence carried weight because it was undivided. This was the final test. Ancient systems never measure mastery in isolation. True discipline must survive contact with chaos. A warrior is not judged by how he performs in silence, but by how he remains centered when surrounded by noise. Challenges appeared quickly. Old patterns returned, testing their ground.
Anger surfaced in moments of disrespect. Doubt whispered during uncertainty. Fatigue tempted shortcuts, but the warrior no longer reacted. He observed. He named the sensation. He chose his response. This was mastery in motion. Modern psychology would call this metacognition, the ability to watch the mind without being ruled by it. The Stoics called it ruling the inner citadel. Zen called it awareness without attachment. Different paths, same destination. The warrior's fractures did not vanish. They revealed themselves daily. But now each crack had been reinforced. Each failure had taught him where to slow, where to soften, where to adjust. Like Kintsugi, his strength did not lie in pretending to be whole. It lay in knowing exactly where he had broken, and why. He no longer chased purpose. Purpose emerged naturally from alignment. His actions were simpler now, cleaner. He chose discipline not to become someone else, but to remain himself. Men noticed the change. They could not name it. There was nothing loud or dominant about him, yet when he spoke, others listened. When conflict arose, his calm shifted the room. Presence does this. It organizes chaos, without force. The warrior understood then that mastery is invisible. It does not announce itself. It does not demand recognition. It simply functions. Temptation still appeared, comfort, distraction, the old desire to escape discomfort. But he treated temptation as weather, temporary, observed, allowed to pass. He no longer feared breaking again, because he understood the final truth of the path. Fracture is not an exception. It is a constant. Life will apply pressure. Loss will arrive. Discipline will falter. The question is not whether you break. The question is how you rebuild. The warrior carried this law quietly, into his work, into his relationships, into solitude, into conflict. He did not become perfect. He became present, and presence changed everything. He knew now that strength is not the absence of fear, but the ability to remain steady while fear speaks. Discipline is not rigid control, but daily return. Stillness is not escape, but foundation. The mentor's lessons lived on, not as memory, but as structure. Years later, the warrior would repair another bowl. Different place, different hands, same method. He would trace the cracks slowly, mix the gold carefully, allow time to do its work, and perhaps another fractured soul would watch, confused, searching for answers. The warrior would not rush to explain. He would offer silence, because mastery once earned is not taught through words. It is transmitted through presence, and thus the path continued, unbroken, precisely because it allowed breaking. For what breaks the warrior is not weakness, but refusing to see that brokenness is the beginning of mastery.